But the other piece is because of the infrastructure, a lot of people end up being scammed. That's the other thing. So I think you've heard over the years where people have gotten adoption consultants who say, I can help you through the process, only for them to get through the process and thousands of dollars later to realize that they were working with somebody that has absolutely nothing to do with the legal adoption process in that particular country.
So what do they end up with?
So they end up with a loss of $100,000 and no child.
And no child.
Yes. Because there are people out there for opportunity purposes. They utilize the fact that the infrastructure is weak. And in Canada, if I do something in Mississauga, it'll follow me all the way to Sudbury. In most countries, if I do something in one province, there's no, because everything is still paper. So there's no paper trail because it's not online, right? So as an end result, that happens as well. But I think the other piece that people are, when you are desperate to start a family, sometimes your mind doesn't work right because you get into this thing of, I so want a child, I so want a child. So any opportunity that is presented to you, you don't question it, right? We have a situation two years ago in Ghana where a young person showed up in Ghana and she was there on holidays and somebody said to her, take my baby. Now, this woman, American, took the baby because she was going to give her a better life and then tried to get the child to the United States and almost ended up in a situation of being incarcerated for child trafficking.
Of course.
Right? Whereas the mother had relinquished she'd given this woman the child, but she didn't go through the legal channel of giving that child up.
And the person who was collecting the child did not know that there is a structured legal way of doing it.
Exactly.
Precisely. So now tell me, what is a structured way of doing it? How should she have done it properly?
So the first thing is that you get a lawyer, right? So a parent has identified you as the guardian that they want for their child. Go and get a lawyer and get and understand what the legal requirement for adopting a child in that particular country is. So, for instance, do they allow you, if you're not Catholic, to adopt a child, if you are in the LGBTQ plus community? So there are certain countries where you have to be of the religion, you have to be of the orientation before you're even eligible, or you're the age group that they allow you. So a lawyer who deals with adoption will be able to tell you the legal aspect of that. While you're doing that, you can set up a house, a home with this child and the parents, and you start to bond, you start to build. So the thing is, there's no guarantee at the end of it you're going to be able to take that child away. But there are systems that you can put in place as well to say, okay, I'm committed to the life of this child. And even if a formal adoption doesn't happen, I will do an informal adoption. So I'm going to get a nanny and I'm going to stay here for 6 months, for a year, and I'm going to see that this person is going to nurture the child in case I have to go back to the United States or Canada. So then once you've gone through that piece, then you make the petition, right? You put in an application that says, I want to adopt this child. And then they will go through, your legal counsel will go through all of the steps that you need to go through. And you may have to leave and come back. That's the other thing. And you may have to leave without the child, right, to allow the system. And that could take anywhere between, depending on how much money you have, it could take 6 months to 6 years.
I should also mention here, this is really important too, is that in Canada, at least, you cannot say, I bring this child from another country and say, I want to adopt this child. What you have to do is actually start at the beginning of the adoption process here. So you're saying in terms of a parent coming back, potential prospective adoptive parent coming back to their country, Canada, the States, you actually have to go through the whole process. So you have to be assessed here. You have to have your home study done. You have to do the training here before you can then go. And then it has to be done in what's considered a reputable agency, right? So you can't just say, my niece or my nephew or this family friend, I have, they're in my care, I'm going to bring them back to Canada. Sadly, that information as well is not widely shared. So I worked at one point at this organization where that's what we did. We informed people about the process. And that was one of the number one concerns and calls that we got with people saying, but I've adopted them in this country, right? So here in North America, you have to go about it the opposite way, or else you will not be able to bring the child into the country. So that's really important for people to also be aware of, that there is a process and you have to do your due diligence 100%.
And sometimes it can take forever, because I also know a couple of friends who have done it. And it's simply because, again, the system is different and they work slower than things are here. And as you said, not so fluid. Yolande, from what you're saying. Yeah.
And money determines a lot of the processes as well, unfortunately. Right. And this is why we have child trafficking laws and so forth, because people then try and circumvent the system. Right. As trying to build family, I think, is one of the most beautiful yet chaotic thing, if it's not something that can happen organically. Right. If it happens organically, where it's like, we're going to go through the IV process, or we're going to, we're going to go out and we're going to decide to have a child. But once you start the legal aspect of building a family, your mindset has to change, even in Canada. Right. Because I think there's also this notion, and I call it the savior mentality. You're not saving children. You're creating a family. So when you take on that responsibility, you also need to take on the cultural aspect of that child as well. So if a child is coming from Romania, they're coming from Rwanda, they're coming from wherever, you have to invest in the understanding of where they're coming from, the history that they've had to that country, because you're going to be in the first 5 years of that adoption, you're going to be dealing with the trauma that was associated with. And even if it's a child that was apprehended at birth, that child is still bringing with you trauma, right? As we call it, blood trauma. And it shows up in when you hear people say that I'm returning that child because it's more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And I think this is the piece of adoption that I get frustrated with, is that if you have a Spanish child, learn Spanish, learn Spanish culture. If you have an African child, learn. Not Africa is not a country, it's a continent. So learn the country of which you're adopting that child and bring in cultural pieces, because at the end of the day, if it's a Black child, society will claim them as Black. And if they don't have that identity, right, then they struggle through life. And if they're Latin and they don't understand the Latin identity, then they also struggle. So I think when we think about adoption, whether it's local or international, we need to first do our own biases around the assumption of why are you adopting? As I said to you, I never thought I was going to adopt. I never thought I was going to have children. But here I am, decades later, where I have other children that didn't, organically come from me. And I'm blessed, right? I'm very blessed. But I'm also an international worker that has seen it firsthand of what happens when you don't do the right process to get you prepared to adopt.
Can I ask you, how did you manage the one with the South American ones, the children that you adopted, and how did you manage the cultural aspect of bringing them up?
I speak Spanish, and I've lived in Latin America for over 30 years. So that was my investment, is that I would need to know and identify. So any festivals stuff, and then making sure that the kids were going back every 2 years, or as often as I could afford, to take them back to that culture so that they had a cultural identity. And I think we misunderstand the importance of the cultural piece, right? If I don't look like you, what can I teach you about you? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And also your innate experiences, because you don't know it. You don't know those innate experiences because you don't look like the person.
Exactly.
There are lots of experiences that they're going to have that you will never know.
Exactly.
And I think
because you're never walking in their shoes.
Yeah. You need to have that village as well, right? I think it's always ironic when people are adopting from country X and they have no ties to it. They have no people from that culture or background. And I'm like, so why are you bringing a child into this culture where they're not going to see themselves represented ever if it's not in your exact network. So taking them to these events, of course, I'm a strong proponent of that, but I also tell parents that I work with, you need to first open up your friend network. You've got to expand, go to the Spanish speaking, event, place of worship, whatever it may be, get that knowledge before you go on this path and bring a child into your home, and then you're scrambling to try and find things, right? I feel like people need to really understand how essential that is to the core of a person, right? It's absolutely essential because they do not understand the shoes that you are walking in every day. And it's awfully sad when that happens. And I've seen it happen personally and through, the many, many people that I've worked with where people are just lost. And then they have this very strange sense of identity and self. And that often impacts their self-worth, right? Their identity, their everything, right? It really is a trickle-down effect.
And the tragedy is that the attempt at becoming what they think they should be becomes a caricature.
Yeah.
Which is a very sad caricature because they're totally lost and they don't have the tools to be able to get them where they should be, to be comfortable in themselves, So what I need to ask Yolande again, one more time, is that in your case, how would you judge your success of being able to do that effectively with your children, especially the ones who are not of your race? I'm talking about, let me use the Latin American children first.
I think because they dictated their needs, I believe that I was, I'd say 80% successful because I listened to them from day one. I've always said, if Canada doesn't work for you, we will move back. And because of how I lived my life, Judith knows I'm not in Canada very long. So when my children were young, I would basically just take them every 2 years to where I thought they needed to be. And we would come back to Canada because I had Canadian kids that I needed to also consider about the Canadian identity. I was going to also say this, because I also have Black kids doesn't mean I knew how to raise Black children. Because my Black children are also different heritage than myself. So even when you ask about the success, my children have all grown up. They're reasonably healthy. I think they still have some trauma from the adoptive cycle. And I don't necessarily know that you ever get away from that. I think you learn to live in the world, but you always know that your family beginning wasn't my neighbor's family beginning. So we talk about it over the years. We've talked about it. And I think as adults, my kids are of the mindset, some needed to reconnect with their biological families, and I have never intervened in that, right? I've basically said, I know where they are, and I give you access. Now that you're 18, I'll give you access to them. If you come back, and this is the hard part for me with my adoption situation, is that my children don't necessarily come back the way I gave them out. So they're not really my children anymore. And that's the hard part of adoption, in the sense that when you adopt a child, most people think it's a permanent thing. That child is mine until I die. That's not necessarily true. You may raise children for 20, 30 years, and at the end of it, have no bond and attachment with them, because the crucial moment for bonding and attachment may not have happened in your journey. So when their biological family come in, that connection that they have in biology sometimes override the nurturance that you have given over the 10, 15, or 20 years.
And the thing is, but do you maintain a relationship with them at all, or is it severed completely?
No, I have an informal relationship. That's a hard one to explain to individuals. I have the relationship I want to have. I mean, I'm not in their life, but I'm also at that age in my life where I did the job that God asked me to do. And now I'm supposed to be the backup singer. I'm the backup singer, right? So we check in, we have connections, I know what's going on, but that let's get together yearly now it's every couple of years. Let's get together for Mother's Day event. Doesn't happen because they're also now adults and they're living their primary life with their spouse and their children. And I have access to those children as well.
Yeah.
But again, I'm in that pre-retirement stage where I don't really want to have children around me. So I'm global now. So I don't not have a relationship. I would say I have the relationship I want to have.
Yeah. That's lovely.
Right.
That's good. And you're comfortable with everything as it is. So then you had the Caucasian children. How did that also go? How did you get the Caucasian children?
Those were the ones who were godchildren. So they were godchildren to mine and to me, and their parents died. And then they ended up being, so when their parents died, they left me as guardian. And then at a certain age, I petitioned for them to be adopted, and I was able to go through the adoption process.
That was in Canada. So how difficult or easy was it for you to support their cultural needs?
Well, the thing is, we live in a Caucasian culture, so I didn't have, which is funny, I didn't have to do anything differently for them. Exactly. My children from other culture, I had to be mindful and intentional, but whiteness is around me every single day, so I don't have to teach you, to be Caucasian. But I had to be mindful of the things that, because if you're raised in a Black culture, or you're raised in my household, you're going to have residues of me. Right? So you're going to have a mindset that's similar to mine. You're going to, so you challenge racism rather than just see your privilege, right? You understand your privilege from a different perspective. You season your food. You reject certain things. You want braids because mommy has braids in her hair, right? So those are the things that I had to be very mindful that in the nature of raising your children culturally, you might be handing on things that would be identified as Blackness, right?
Exactly.
So being mindful of that Blackness.
So that you don't impose it on them or make it their, because either they take it on and it's not there, it's not really natural for them. Were you able to do that?
So yes. I mean, my children as white as they come.
Do they still hold some of the cultural aspects of growing up in a Black household, would you say?
I don't think that they can go away from that. So the mindfulness about racism, my two children are very aware of the privilege of being white in the world, and they walk the world differently, and they engage in dialogue with their friends and family from a very different perspective than my other friends whose children wasn't raised by a woman of color, right? So when I talk to them, what I hear is intentional living, right? So when they hear of stuff going on in the university or at their workplace, they're the first to champion why that is wrong, right? Because in my house, inclusion was the big thing. From day one, we look at persons with disability and why are they not in your classroom. We look at, the child who is being raised by two dads, because we had a situation when the kids were young of one of my dearest friends were two dads raising their children. And me purposely making sure that my kids spent as much time understanding that family construct, right? Whether you're Black, you're indigenous, whether you're white, family structure comes differently. So I think the hardest part wasn't so much the process of adoption, but actually being a parent of a transracial adoption. So going to the park and having people call the police. Because you are abducting a child, or going to the school and having the teacher say, why did they send the maid for parent-teacher interview rather than the parent? Or being in the supermarket and having your children do what every 3-year-old do when they want candy and you say no, and then having people chastise you as the caregiver as to why you are letting them on the floor screaming and so forth. And so those are the pieces for me that was more traumatic. The piece around, raising children of Caucasian, and in North America, it's everywhere. So I don't necessarily had to but society wasn't prepared for me as much as I was prepared for society. So I spent a lot of moments kind of going, I will be very honest with you, where I considered I may not have been the right person for this job. But based on what was left in the will, I was like, I cannot not honor a promise I made.
Yeah. Wow. So at the moment, what's your relationship with the two children, the two Caucasian?
With all of my kids is the same. I hear from them monthly, weekly, in some cases. Grandchildren I hear from as often as I want to listen to nana, 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 because there's a lot of nanas. I think I have a good relationship, a healthy relationship. I'm also not a person that attached myself to my children were never my identity. So their success isn't my success in the sense that they're individuals that is in the world now as their own entity. I'm very proud of the accomplishment and I'm happy to know that I contributed something to it. And every time I hear about a job promotion or I hear, something the grandchildren have done and the kids will report back, that's so you, I'm blessed to hear that, right? But I believe that we as a society, we raise children and then we have to be prepared to let them go. If, they say if you love something, let it go. If it comes back, it's yours. It's kind of that kind of belief system. You raise them, you nurture them, and then you let them know I'm a friend to you now. So whatever your needs are, I will be there. But I'm no longer the parent because you're now your own, you're a wife, you're a mother. I'm there for advice. I'm there for support. It hasn't always been easy. I'm going to be honest with you. And I've had some challenges over the years with just, again, not being the biological parent.
And I think that particularly is the case with the transracial adoptees, isn't it? That's where not being the biological parent becomes a big issue. Or was it with all of them?
Would you believe that it was with the kids who are Black heritage that I had more issue with?
Oh, really?
Yes.
I see.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But they're not Canadian children, are they? They're not from your culture.
They're they're Canadian, but they're Canadian, Arabic, Black. It's a and what's the AS said?
Multicultural, multi-ethnic.
But also what the identity that the Children's Aid Society told me turned out not to be the identity of the children.
So you're working blindly.
Well, no, I was working with that. They were Nova Scotian Blacks, right? And then when they became of age and they went through the adoption council and they were able to reach out to their adopted, like their biological family, then they have found out that they're everything other than what was told. So my younger kids are now having to navigate new cultural identity because you grow up thinking that you're this. Yeah. And then when you meet your biological mother and father, and then you realize, okay, but that's not what I've been told for 28 years. That's not what I've been told for 29 years. So now they're having to relearn cultural identity now that especially the youngest two, now that they've met their biological fathers.
How did that impact on you in terms of how they related to you in this situation?
Well, there was a bit of blame.
They didn't blame.
There was a bit of blame. Yes.
Even though you wouldn't have known, even though they knew you wouldn't have known, you could only go by what you were told. Would they still blame you?
But you as a parent, you know this, that when things go bad, the parents are always the first to be the ones that you blame, whether you knew it or you didn't know it. And I guess that's the piece that I think is amazing. If your kids feel comfortably enough that they blame you, you know you've done a good job because they feel safe enough because they can't do it out here, right? So you're the safe place, so they could put that blame. And I think as they're working through, and I think it'll take them some time to work through it. They will come to a better understanding of why I didn't know. Because with the system, I don't control the historical piece. And as much as they tell you a child comes with a life book, the life book is based on what the worker puts in the book, right?
Or what even the birth mother tells them. And the birth mother can decide that I'm not going to tell the truth. I'll just give them a long told story, and that's it. And that ends up in the book.
And this is the other piece. Julian and I had a conversation a while about this, is that children who get apprehended by Children's Aid Society in Canada, for instance. When you get apprehended or you are taken away because of neglect or abuse or whatever, and you're put in the system, and it's usually a white system because there isn't a lot of Black adoptive parents out there. Let's be honest about that, right? So you end up in a system, and then you are then told that this parent was X, Y, and Z. And we talked about if you understand the culture before the worker makes the assumption, a lot of our children that is in care would not be in care. And that also speaks to my two last kids. The mother was young and she needed a lot of support. Instead of supporting the mother to keep the kid, they saw her as being rude. They saw her as being arrogant because when she would go visit her kids and the hair wasn't plait the way she would plait, or the kids weren't dressed the way, and in Black culture, that's a huge thing, the hair and the clothes. So when she goes for a scheduled visit and she's acting up and you say she's detached for her children, it's not that she's detached, it's that you're doing things to her children she doesn't approve. So when she loses, so all of that is now part of the reconnection that my children now have to go through because they have to now understand that she loved them but couldn't care for them because of her own age and lack of resources to support. So they were navigating a whole bunch of new things. And I've kind of stepped back to allow them, opportunity to do that learning and bonding and asking questions without having to look after me. I don't want them to be so, oh, Mom, are you okay? I want them to say, we're reaching out to Bio Mom and Mom is okay. And I've said that to them. Mom is okay. So go talk to your mom, go talk to your dad, get those information that you need. And at the end of it, we will have a different relationship because of what this will bring. And if we don't have a relationship, that's also okay because I did what I was called upon to do.
Wow. That's, I have to say, incredibly rare. I think in the adoption community, and I can understand where a lot of it comes from, that desperation to have family and, the desire and the long, long processes that happen. But there's a lot of ownership, right? Instead of what I like to is claiming. Yes, you need to claim the child, bring them into your fold, love on them, pour into them, but knowing always and forever, this is what I deem a shared child. The biological family doesn't disappear on adoption, right? They will be there, whether they're involved or not. That's an important element to always hold on to. And I think that's part of where the fear does come for adoptive parents when they think reunion is such a scary thing. My child might leave me. Yes, but often what I've found in my experience is they don't leave you completely. They explore, they find out what they need to know. And then often they'll bridge, right? Your relationship with everybody, and I love that addition, not subtraction. We don't have to remove all these people and then be like, this is it. This is all you get. I think that's really key and essential for that to be the message. I also think that's where openness really comes into it, right? We're doing a lot more now to support relationships from the beginning with biological family, first family, and the child and adoptive family. And that in my ideal worldview is how it really should be. There should be more of that and less of this separation, albeit, of course, we know there's a section of people who are not safe. So I always have to say that caveat as well. And we know that's realistic. But whenever there is that opportunity, I think we need to step into that even more, to support this connection, this community, and not having to necessarily leave and cleave and then, come back. It can just be for all of that. So
I think that also one of the things that is important, what's come out of this is a lot of people who are going into adoption are going to adopt a child that they never had. So they're expecting the full package. A child will stick with me through thick and thin, be there for me in my old age and all of that. So really the message we're saying is that, yes, that's the ideal situation that may happen, but be prepared if it doesn't happen. And it's about also bracing yourself emotionally, be able to deal with it. Because not everybody can deal with that kind of thing emotionally, because they invest so much into it and expect that at the end of the day, if nothing else, something will be there for me in terms of a relationship that's going to continue with this child. So again, that immediately speaks to a different kind of training for adoptive parents, because it's to help them to understand that it may go south at the end when these children do. And sometimes it's not even when they find their adoptive parents. Sorry, their biological parents. They may not even meet their biological parent at all. It may just go south, because of all the challenge that they're going through, and to let the adoptive parents know that there is also that possibility. And it's important so that they don't set themselves up to fail, one, but they don't also set themselves up to become too disappointed and despondent, because unfortunately, that is what happens in a lot of the cases, where when that happens, they're so unprepared for it that they're totally at a loss and can't understand where they may have gone wrong.
It takes a village. And if you raise your children thinking that it takes a village, then irrelevant of what happens after 18, that village is going to sustain them. And I fundamentally believe that people who don't tell their children that they're adoptive, especially transracial, I'm like, come on, it's obvious the child is adopted, right? You do them a disservice, because I talked about this at the beginning, where society will claim you as a culture. And if you weren't raised to know that culture, when you get claimed, you're navigating a whole different river, right? You're meandering down that river kind of lost. So I think first, if I could give any advice to an adoptive parent, I would say is that if you individually or as a couple decide you want to adopt, first check in with yourself to understand, why do you want to adopt, right? What are you bringing to the table for that potential child that you're going to raise? And if that child doesn't bond and attach to you, can you still parent that child? Because it's a lifelong commitment that you've made, right? So if you say you cannot, then what does that mean for the child? And what systems do you have in place to help that child still get to 18, 21, right? With your support behind the scene. Because not all adoptions go the way we expect it to go, as Judith just said. Some adoptions will go for a period of time, and then trauma may resurface, and that child may distance themselves. And if you take it personally, then that child will distance themselves even more. So I think if you understand your rationale for adopting, what are you committed to do? It's like when you take on a job, what are you truly committed to? It's not just about love, but it's a lifelong sacrifice of putting that child first and being able to say, I'll be there no matter what. And sometimes the I be there means I have to step back.
Yeah. And also it means that no matter what be means that even if they never come back, I'll be satisfied knowing that I did my best.
Exactly.
I think that is, to me, the most important thing, putting your best into it, no matter what. And I think even if it looks like nothing comes back to you, something always does, because if you did your best, the child will thrive. And that in itself is good enough.
You change the quality of life that child
That's
have
what I'm saying.
if you didn't intervene.
Precisely. So their life is better than what it would have been if they stayed in wherever they were from the outset. So even if it doesn't come back directly, there is always that satisfaction of knowing that because of your intervention alone, a life has been transformed for the better. And that in itself is a wonderful thing. And I think that I want to leave us on that note, that no matter what you do, to me, the most important thing in adoption is put your best into it. Literally, your absolute best, the best that you can, so that the outcome will be satisfactory to you. You'll be able to live with whatever the outcome is. Even if they reject you, you're still able to accept it because you know you did your best. And I think that's other. So there wouldn't be an issue of if only, oh, maybe I should have done this, I should. No. No, you just do your absolute best, regardless of the outcome. And I think the outcome will always be satisfactory. Yolande, thank you so much for this interview. I have to say, it's been quite an eye-opener. Hearing what happens in all the other countries is unfamiliar territory. But it's important territory for everybody else here to know, because as you said, if you are going to adopt from those parts of the world, you would do well, not just to know about it, but to have an understanding of how that system works, so that when you are being affected in your even adoption process is being affected, you know exactly what is causing it. And then you know what level of commitment you need to give to this adoption. Thank you so much for explaining it to us. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Really appreciate having you.
My pleasure. Like you too, I'm an advocate for adoption, healthy adoption.
Yep.
And I think I would like to see the kinship piece be supported more, because too many kids are in the system, and I would like to see them out of the system and not just age out of the system. So I would love to see more support for kinship. Yeah. Informal as well as formal adoptions.
Yeah. And what my thoughts have always been that if they could give them the financial support that they need, but also parental training, because some of them literally just don't have it. But to have parental training that is monitored to enable them to continue what they're learning and implement it, so that everybody is at a good place. I mean, I do hope that someday somebody hears this and the country begins to implement it. Thank you very much, Yolande.
Oh, my pleasure. And anytime, my pleasure.
Well, that is wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, folks. We hope that you've learned, and Giselle and I definitely have learned, our minds have been opened, and this is why we do our program, to continue to learn and educate and grow together. So please remember to join us next month for Adoption Dialog. Again, we'll have a really great insight and information sharing opportunity. And if you have any questions, comments, or you yourself would like to be interviewed, you can email us at adoptiondialog@gmail.com. Thank you and good night.
Good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.